Story 1. I have gone from drinking 3 to 4 beers a night during the week and maybe 18 on the weekend to only drinking on the weekend, then to just a couple of beers on the weekend, and now to nothing at all. The end of this month will mark a year since I drank anything. There is no real reason. I simply phased it out for the time being. Story 2. The older I get, I seem to metabolize alcohol differently, and now find that my sleep is compromised if I have more than 2 drinks. Story 3. I consumed a fifth of alcohol each night for almost 10 years. I quit a few months ago. My liver is damaged, and there may be fluid in my abdomen. My white blood cell count is very high while my red blood cell count is very low. I am going to see a specialist on Thursday to hopefully regain my health. Story 4. I have maybe 1 drink every month or 2, and that's only when we're out to dinner with friends. I've never really been much of a drinker, but I think it's gradually been less over the years. What's funny is that a few years ago, I picked up a hobby of making whiskey and rum. It's relaxing and fun, but I still don't drink. It's enjoyable to give away as gifts, though. Story 5. I have zero consistency. Sometimes it's 2 beers in a month. Other times it's like 30 in a day. Overall, I'd say my consumption is decreasing. I don't like to drink just to drink. You'll never catch me sitting at home alone drinking, but get me in the right crowd at the right time, and I'm on a train bound for Hangover City. Fortunately, as I get older, I have fewer friends dragging me out to the bars. Story 6. I have been a daily drinker my entire adult life. During the COVID-19 pandemic, I did nothing but drink. I attended my first Alcoholics Anonymous meeting almost 3 years ago, and I haven't touched a drink since. I put all my drinking behind me and I'm done. I am now 52 years old and have never been happier. I identify as an alcoholic, but I will not drink today. Story 7. As I got older, I had less time for that. There was too much to do to be hungover, and I couldn't maintain too many unhealthy habits. Outside of events or very occasional gatherings with friends, I would drink 1 to 4 times on the weekends, sometimes not at all. Story 8. I gave up alcohol altogether about 18 months ago. I do miss it occasionally, but I am learning about the various non-alcoholic beverages available to supplement. Story 9. 0 a week, a month, a year. I don't drink at all. I have no health or religious reasons for it, but after working for 3 years in a liquor store in Russia and witnessing things you would not believe, I will never drink. Story 10. Not a drop for a little over 500 days now. I feel great and sleep well. I think I will probably continue this for the rest of my life. Story 11. All the sober people here are not contributing answers and are just patting themselves on the back. Drinks per week have remained the same as I get older. I monitor my health to ensure I'm not creating an issue. I take random weeks off alcohol from time to time. Get some blood work done and you'll know if you need to drink less. Information is always your friend. Story 12. I rarely drink anymore. I honestly don't think I've had anything to drink yet in 2025. I sleep poorly when drinking, and then I feel terrible the entire next day. It has kind of lost its appeal for me. Story 13. I would drink 2 bottles of wine plus 2 shots or a dozen high noons plus 2 shots 4 to 5 days a week. This year, I stopped drinking for January and February, and now I drink on Friday and Saturday, but the volume has decreased. I started working out every day and I've lost about 30 pounds. Story 14. My alcohol intake has drastically decreased as I've gotten older. I used to have 3 or 4 drinks in an evening during my 20s, but now I have only 3 or 4 drinks in a year in my late 40s. Once I stopped seeing ethanol as a fun substance and started viewing it as a mild poison, my drinking has significantly reduced. Story 15. I have no alcohol in a normal week, but once every few months, I get completely intoxicated. This has increased with age, but I am still young. Story 16. Nowadays, the last time I tried to have a drink was after a friend's funeral. They had a gathering at a bar, and I reluctantly attended. Someone bought me a beer, but it just didn't taste the same. I had 1 drink, and that was it. Years ago, when I was a heavy drinker before my driving under the influence incident, I drank at least an 18-pack of Busch Light every single day, and on most days I had a fifth of Crown Royal or a bottle of vodka with it. Story 17. I will buy a 12-pack of beer when the weather gets nice in spring and probably drink the last one when the leaves start falling in autumn. Story 18. I don't think I can count that high. I am 30 years old and still in shape. All my doctor's appointments consistently result in a clean bill of health. Therefore, I will continue to enjoy beer and drink it. Story 19. Many individuals in their 20s believe that alcohol consumption increases with age. It peaks in this decade, and while people may drink regularly in their 30s, those in their 40s and beyond often recognize that working with a hangover is not ideal. Additionally, family responsibilities make it difficult to take time off or change jobs frequently, leading to a decrease in drinking. People simply grow tired of feeling unwell. Story 20. It's all over the map. For the most part, I don't drink a lot during the week anymore. I used to because I would almost have to drink to loosen up enough to paint, but I'm past that now, thankfully. I do drink a fair amount on the weekends if I have a drag show because it's fun to be out and socializing with my friends, though the real drinking doesn't really start until the show is over for obvious reasons. Story 21. I drink more now than I did when I was younger. In my 20s, I would get tipsy and call it a night. Now, I usually get quite intoxicated when I drink. Not to the point of blacking out, but still quite impaired. I only drink on weekends and generally do so unless there is an event during the week for some reason. Story 22. I just started a year of probation, so now it's 0. But it was usually 3 to 4 12-packs of beer a week. Story 23. I drink 3 to 4 days a week normally. The consumption varies. It could be 1 to 2 beers a night or several hours of drinking with multiple drinks. It all depends. I wouldn't say it has decreased as I've gotten older. It's more organized and planned now. Story 24. I slowed down a lot in my 40s, but then ramped up again last year after some personal struggles. Now it's back down to almost nothing on weekdays and infrequent on weekends. I don't need that burden on my back again. Story 25. My weekly alcohol consumption has gone from 0 as a child to 0 as an adult. I can't stand the taste. Story 26. I barely have anything, although I love a glass of good wine. I just never get around to it. I might have a glass a couple of times a year. Story 27. My alcohol consumption is similar to my restaurant and takeout consumption. I would consume it multiple times a day without self-control. For my health and finances, I limit myself to 1 or 2 drinks a week. Story 28. I am in my 40s and drinking more frequently than in my 30s. I believe it is because I have developed an interest in fine wine. However, I do consume fewer drinks per session, so my hangovers are minimal. Story 29. I rarely drink now. I might have a glass of scotch or bourbon occasionally and very rarely a beer or 2 when I am with certain family members who drink. I used to drink heavily in my youth and then semi-regularly in my late 20s. Now in my 40s, if I have more than a couple of drinks, I feel the effects the next day, so I choose not to. Story 30. I am not sober. I just almost never drink. I have not had a drink so far this year. I guess my drinking habits have decreased as I've gotten older, but clearly, it was never something that was very important to me. Story 31. I used to have a problem with binge drinking and blackouts. I haven't blacked out since February of last year. I drink 2 to 4 drinks each weekend, and some weekends I don't drink at all. I am 30 years old. Story 32. Decreased as I've gotten older, up until January 20th, 2025. I am joking, but seriously, this year has felt like a decade. Story 33. I am 51 now. I stopped drinking around the age of 35. I did not have an issue, but I saw a path where it could become one. So I decided to stop. I probably have 1 drink per year at Christmas when I enjoy an Irish coffee after Christmas dinner. Story 34. Mid-40s. About a handle of bourbon a week in the form of 3 to 4 nightcaps. Much less than when I was younger. Story 35. I am pregnant, so I am not the best candidate, but even before, my weekly alcohol consumption was 0. If my boyfriend and I went out for a drink with friends, it would maybe be once a month, if that. However, when I was single, I would drink a lot 1 night a week. It has always been social drinking for me. I know I am in the minority, as most of my colleagues drink wine every night. Story 36. Varies greatly. Most weeks I drink none. Some weeks I drink a lot. I either don't drink at all or I drink a significant amount. My drinking has decreased as I've gotten older. The year 2020 really changed my habits. I actually drank significantly less that year. I generally only drink when I go out. I don't enjoy drinking at home. Since I was at home all the time, I drank much less. Now I tend to go out less overall, so I drink less. I think it has less to do with age. I can still keep up when I want to. I have a wife now and other responsibilities in my life, so I can't just go out drinking every weekend. Story 37. I have definitely cut back on drinking as I have gotten older. I am currently 35, and even if you compare it to when I was 30, it is drastically less. Story 38. Down to 0 over the last year. I am on the brink of 40. I still work as a bartender but do not feel tempted in the slightest. Alcohol makes me miserable. Story 39. It has decreased, although I was never a big drinker. I don't enjoy how alcohol makes me feel, as it makes me very tired. However, I do like to have a nice cocktail or a glass of wine. I used to drink occasionally when I was out with others, but now I drink for pleasure. I'd say I went from having a few drinks on the weekends to enjoying a craft cocktail or a glass of wine at home. Story 40. I have decreased my alcohol consumption significantly, only having about 2 beers a week. I hardly think about drinking anymore. It used to be that nice weather meant having beers in the front yard with neighbors, but now I prefer to sit in a chair, read, and drink water. Story 41. Usually, I have zero interest in drinking alcohol. I never understood the appeal of consuming it when I am alone and not doing anything at home. When I am with friends, I might drink some or even get drunk if we are celebrating or at a party. Story 42. I never had a regular weekly consumption of alcohol, but I used to drink socially at parties, which were not too frequent. Now, I don't drink at all. Medications, am I right? I occasionally miss having a cocktail. Story 43. I feel like I am being excessive when I buy a case of summer shandy and have one each night for 16 nights. Turns out that is a low end. Story 44. As I entered college, surprisingly, my alcohol consumption decreased significantly. I know many people experience the opposite. Story 45. I have never been a huge drinker, but I only have a drink for special occasions now. I have issues with inflammation, and alcohol seems to make it worse. I still enjoy beer, so I have been buying the non-alcoholic options recently. Overall, I think I am healthier for it. Story 46. It depends. When I was younger, I was a binge drinker. In college, I was drunk every weekend. After university, I was more of a half bottle of wine a night person. Now it's a mix. When I don't have parenting responsibilities, I'll drink slowly throughout the day, because if I don't have those responsibilities, I'm either playing video games, doing crafts, or watching a movie. Both activities are enjoyable with a bit of a buzz. This only happens about once or twice a year. My husband makes beer and cider. When we have a fresh batch, we tend to share a 750 milliliter bottle with dinner, even on a weeknight. I haven't been drunk since my bachelorette party 12 years ago. Story 47. 5 to 6 drinks spread out over the weekend. I have decreased my consumption with age because I drank heavily in college. I would love to reduce the number to 4. Story 48. Right now, I usually have a beer or two on Friday or Saturday. I golf a lot and I enjoy a cold drink after a round. I could go without it. As I got older, I significantly reduced my consumption. I used to drink more socially, but now I pass. My decision to cut back was influenced by work events where I saw high-level executives become intoxicated and overshare. I made that mistake years ago and will not do it again. Personally, I feel terrible the next day, and I also stay away from hard liquor and wine. Story 49. Definitely decreased as I aged. Every Friday on my way home from work, I pick up a 6-pack and a tall can. This will last me all weekend. Story 50. It fluctuates. Sometimes I go days or weeks without drinking, and other times I might feel tipsy every night for 2 weeks with everything in between. Recently, I've been having 1 to 3 glasses of wine or hard seltzers with dinner, and a little more on the weekends because why not? Story 51. I usually drink only a few times a year. This has been consistent throughout my life, even in my younger years. When I do drink, it's typically 1 or 2 drinks, and that's about it. Story 52. A couple of drinks a week has gone down a little, mostly because of medication. Some weeks, I don't drink anything. Story 53. I have a couple of glasses of wine a week. I stopped drinking beer and hard alcohol as it was difficult to maintain my weight, and I sleep poorly. I actually enjoy having a very low tolerance for alcohol because 1 or 2 glasses of wine after a week without any drinks is extremely pleasurable. When I get a hangover, I feel lethargic and don't really want to play with my kids or engage in activities that help keep our life moving forward. In fact, dealing with a hangover around kids is absolutely miserable, especially while receiving disapproving looks from my spouse. The enjoyment isn't worth the trouble like it once was. Story 54. I'm 27 years old and will occasionally have a beer or 2 on the weekends if I am spending time with family, but I do not drink during the week. It affects my sleep as well. Story 55. I drank like a typical college student and later had a beer here and there as a young adult, attending a few parties throughout the year that resulted in hangovers. A few years ago, I went through a bad divorce and drank more during that time, but I eventually got through it, cut back to a normal amount, and got remarried. Over the past couple of years, I have gradually drunk less and less. My most recent drink was a pumpkin beer this past fall, and the one before that was last spring. Before that was in July 2023. Now, I average about 1 beer every 8 to 9 months. Story 56. A week? Maybe 2 to 3 drinks on average. It increased during COVID, but I have reduced it. It's just not fun anymore. Story 57. I used to have 6 to 20 drinks 1 to 3 times a week. Nowadays, I drink once a month and don't go over 6. I avoid drinking on weekdays as a rule, as it disrupts my sleep too much. Story 58. I consume about 3/5 of a bottle of vodka, Kamchatka, and 3 to 4 Natty Daddy beers a week. I am over 50. I know I am trying to drown my demons. Story 59. My drinking habits have definitely decreased with age. I consumed alcohol heavily from ages 20 to 26 while working in bars. However, after leaving the bar industry, my drinking declined sharply, and now I only drink a few times a year. Story 60. I average about 10 drinks a week, down from 14 to 20. Interestingly, my drinking has increased significantly since my youth. I drank very little in my 20s, then moderately in my 30s because it was part of my work. In my early 40s, I discovered fine whiskey, and I have recently started to reduce my consumption to avoid developing health problems. Story 61. Probably about a pint of vodka a week, sometimes spread out and sometimes consumed all at once. It used to be a pint every day, so I've definitely improved. Story 62. I usually have 1 or 2 drinks every couple of weeks on my days off, unless my exercise is too intense. When I'm pushing myself, I only drink water. Story 63. 0. 13 years sober now. Almost getting into a wreck with my newborn son has truly changed my ways. Story 64. My consumption of alcoholic beverages increased as I got older, but it was only because I did not start enjoying them until my mid-30s. Now, I average about 2 to 3 drinks per month. Story 65. I probably have about 6 drinks a year. It was much higher between the ages of 17 and 22, but other than that, it has never been a big part of my life. I have no problems with alcohol and nothing against it, but it just feels inconvenient, expensive, and pointless to make it a regular aspect of my life. Story 66. Approximately 0. I only drink on social occasions. If I have 2 glasses of wine, I tend to share the entire story of my life. Story 67. I consume less than 1 drink a week. My drinking habits have decreased as I get older, mainly due to changes in my lifestyle. Before the pandemic, I used to go out for drinks at least twice a week with colleagues and prospects. Story 68. I no longer drink casually at home. A drink or 2 to relax after work just isn't worth the calories, money, and poor sleep. I still enjoy a good cocktail before dinner and a nice glass of wine with dinner at a nice restaurant. If I go to a party or out with friends, I will definitely have several drinks, but I'm no longer interested in trying to see how drunk I can get or doing shots. Story 69. Have 3 to 4 good-sized cocktails on Thursday, Friday, and Saturday. Sometimes a Bloody Mary or two on Sunday. 5 years ago, it was a few almost every night. Story 70. 0 to 3 beers a week, including wine or other beverages. I used to have a beer every day after work and 2 to 3 on the weekends. Now, I feel unwell when I do that. I have also seen too many people my age in their 30s with jaundice, fluid accumulation in the abdomen, or bowel cancer. Story 71. Usually, I have a drink once every couple of weeks unless there is some kind of celebration. During the holidays, I tend to drink more because there are more events. My alcohol consumption has decreased as I have gotten older. Story 72. I only drink at social gatherings such as weddings and parties, which is not often at all. Therefore, my alcohol consumption is practically zero, and it has not increased or decreased with age. Story 73. 8 to 10 beers a week, mostly on the weekend. I work from home, and sometimes I take my laptop to a local brewery in the late afternoon and have a pint. I plan to do that this afternoon. I no longer bring alcohol into my house because during the pandemic I learned that if I have it at home, I will drink some each night until it's gone. I never really get drunk, but 2 to 3 beers, 2 to 3 glasses of bourbon, and 2 to 3 glasses of wine every night is not good for my mind, body, or soul. Story 74. I would say I have a lighter but more consistent amount now. It used to be weeks without drinking and then 1 or 2 weeks where I would polish off a 30-pack and a 1.75-liter bottle. Now, I only drink on weekends like a 12-pack or 2 bottles of wine, but it's almost every weekend. Story 75. Weekly, I drink about 2/3 or even less than in my younger years, but I still get quite drunk a couple of times a year with more than 12 beers and a couple of shots mixed in. Story 76. About 5 years ago, I was probably drinking a bottle of something and a 24-pack every 2 weeks. Now I only drink socially, but I smoke significantly more cannabis. Cannabis is now my daily driver. Story 77. I do not really like alcohol. If I get a 6-pack for some reason, it can easily last me 4 or 5 months. Story 78. 1 to 2 beers. If you average the one night a month, I have 4 to 5. Yes, it's way less. I'm 51, though. Back in my 20s and 30s, it was more like 24 to 36 a week. I'm glad kids today don't drink like we did. Story 79. I feel like I have become allergic to alcohol as I get older. I cannot drink beer or hard liquor without immediately throwing up. Wine seems to be the only drink that does not cause this reaction, but I may have only 1 glass of wine a year. Story 80. Increased until this week. It looks like I might be done, as some blood tests showed questionable results for my liver. This could be due to strenuous workouts or my love of whiskey, but I am not taking the chance. Story 81. 1 drink per week is my current limit, a decrease over the years. In my 20s, we partied every weekend. I was married to an alcoholic and drank a lot more socially. I didn't drink as much as my friends because I needed to ensure everyone got home safely. In my 30s, it was my time to party, and others made sure we all got home safely. As I get older, I feel the effects more, and most people start to cut back. Now that I'm in my 40s, I don't want to be reckless, but I do enjoy a nice alcoholic beverage from time to time. Story 82. It has decreased, but I was never a habitual heavy drinker to begin with. I used to get drunk at parties or outings in my 20s. I never went overboard, and I never blacked out, although I have gotten mildly sick. Now in my mid-30s, on average, I have maybe 1 beer a week, although I sometimes go several weeks without one. It's my favorite alcoholic drink, but the kind I like is expensive, and since it's addictive, I limit my consumption. Story 83. 0. The only time I drink is during Mardi Gras, Halloween, Friendsgiving, Thanksgiving, Christmas, and New Year's. Any other time of the year, I'm stoned. Story 84. I drank a lot in high school and college. Now I only buy alcohol when I have company staying over who want to partake. Occasionally, I will have a beer with dinner if we are eating out. Story 85. During my 20s, when I lived alone, I could easily drink a 6-pack of beer in one night. It wasn't every night, but it was whenever I felt like it. Now in my mid-30s, I try to limit my drinking to the weekends. I still don't get hangovers, but I am married and have responsibilities now. I would say I consume a little over a six-pack per weekend at most. Story 86. If I go out to enjoy live music, I have one beer in a week. If I skip going out, I have no alcohol. Story 87. Weekly 0. Monthly, probably 0. Yearly, 4 to 6 maybe. Yes, it has decreased as I have gotten older, but that is more due to realizing I was using it as a crutch to socialize. As I have matured, I no longer care what unimportant people think about me. Story 88. I have 2 drinks a week. I believe that having experienced 2 failed relationships with dysfunctional alcoholics influences this. Story 89. I was drinking 5 to 6 tall cans a day for years. Last fall, I stopped from Monday to Friday as I was enjoying it too much and gaining weight. The 5 to 6 tall cans started when things became difficult with the COVID-19 pandemic and work became overwhelming. I have stuck with it and participated in a dry January as well. I am losing weight slowly and sleeping much better. I notice as I get older, drinking is less appealing at times. I have caught myself several times in the last 6 months just not wanting to drink. This goes for both beer and cannabis. I never got into wine, and I only consume hard liquor on very special occasions and in very small amounts, as I am not a fan. Story 90. I want to drink more but find it difficult. I often feel too full after dinner or tired at the end of the day, so I average about 1 drink a week, usually a sherry. Story 91. At 66 years old, my alcohol consumption has slowly tapered down to 1 to 2 beers every 3 to 4 days and 6 to 8 on weekends. I generally drink light beer or a Pilsner. I prefer not to consume India Pale Ale or anything else with a relatively high alcohol content. Story 92. When I worked in pubs, I easily drank 3 to 5 pints a day, even more on weekends. Now I'm down to 1 or 2 beers per week. The hangovers became too unpleasant. Story 93. It used to be that I would start drinking Monday morning and stop Sunday night. That was many years ago while I was in the army. Story 94. Almost yes, it has decreased a lot. As I have gotten older, my binge drinking has dropped to 0. Hangovers now take much longer to get over and are worse than when I was younger. Story 95. Thank God. What a life I have. I have not drunk alcohol and I will not drink it. It is better to drink water. Story 96. My drinking increased from about 1 or 2 drinks a month to 1 or 3 drinks a week depending on my schedule. The major difference was the change in my work and social relationships. I drink less around others, so now that I don't interact as much, I can drink more. Story 97. I have never been a big drinker, so I probably have 1 drink every 2 to 5 months. It varies from year to year. Story 98. Before I quit drinking at the age of 57, I consumed a 12-pack of India Pale Ale daily, starting at 9 a.m. My drinking and my life were out of control, but I have been sober for almost 9 years. Story 99. I used to drink 2 beers, each 0.5 liters, every evening. However, it often became 3 because they were so delicious, which made me suspicious. In autumn 2019, Sober October was announced, and I thought it was a good idea to participate. It went well, and I didn't start again in November. I sometimes have 1 beer with a meal at a restaurant or by myself 1 occasionally, but that's it. This approach has worked for me ever since. I essentially stopped for general health reasons. As you get older, it's important to adopt a healthier lifestyle if you haven't done so from the beginning. Story 100, now 0. 2 years ago, 5 to 7 liters of vodka plus various beers and wine. What changed? Carnivore diet. Story 101. I am 41 years old and have reduced my drinking over the decades. In my 20s, I partied a lot. In my 30s, I had more casual drinks at home or at the pub. Now, as a parent of 2 young children, I train like an athlete because I want to perform my best each day. Currently, I may consume 6 drinks a month, compared to 6 drinks before going out in my 20s. Story 102. I have gone from drinking a lot at parties in my 20s to not drinking at all because I was too busy with school and work in my early 30s to drinking a few times a week. However, I no longer drink to get drunk. That was the goal in my younger years. Now, I just want my meal to taste better or to have something to savor during a conversation. Similarly, my choice of drink has evolved from just hard liquor and cheap beer to a diverse selection of beer, wine, spirits, or cocktails. It is really about enhancing the experience or appreciating a flavor rather than just drinking or feeling a buzz. That said, I have also become much better at appreciating things like conversations, so my gatherings do not need to be excessive like they were when I was younger. Story 103. I drink a glass of red wine before bed once or twice a week, and that's about it. If I drink to get drunk at any point, I just end up feeling sleepy. Story 104. Usually I have between 6 to 18 drinks. I like to enjoy a drink or two with dinner, whether it's beer or wine. To me, it feels strange to just have a plain glass of water with dinner, especially with a nice meal. I enjoy cooking and consider myself a good cook, so I eliminated all soft drinks a few years ago. I very rarely have more than 3 drinks in a night, even on special occasions. That has definitely changed since my mid-20s. I used to drink heavily with friends. Story 105. I consume about 5 to 8 glasses of Islay Scotch, half a bottle of Sierra Tropical Chili, and a 12-pack of India Pale Ale at home. When I go out, I usually have 6 to 7 beers at the bar, about 1 to 2 nights a week, rarely more than 3. This is an average. I am 27 years old, soon to be 28, and my consumption has been about the same, if not slightly less, since I started drinking at 14 or 15. I do not use drugs or smoke. I only drink. Most of my drinking is for enjoyment rather than getting drunk. So when I drink, I often engage in activities like playing bass or watching something I have been wanting to see for a while. Story 106. I average about 2 to 3 drinks a week, usually just an occasional glass of wine or cider on Friday or Saturday, especially while cooking something special. I typically limit myself to 2 drinks in one sitting and do not have an unlimited supply, so I often go 3 to 4 weeks without any at all. On average, this is likely a bit more than when I was younger, but I have improved my homebrewing skills over the years. Story 107. I'm good for 4 to 6 beers on Thursday night and 2 to 3 shots. This is our drinking day while out with friends after work. That's typically my only alcoholic consumption, aside from the occasional martini if we go out for dinner, or perhaps a beer at a burger place if we go there. 95% of my consumption happens on one day, and then that's typically it. I have cut back significantly as I get older. I went from drinking several drinks every night to now having one day where I allow myself to have a good time and be social with friends. Story 108. 4 years sober today. Before that, I was drinking 5 to 7 drinks a day, usually whiskey. I had been a daily drinker since I was 15, but I mostly stuck to beer. When I made the switch to whiskey and started taking more shots, everything went downhill. I never thought I would be able to let go of something I loved so much. But here I am, and I'm better for it. I highly recommend it. Story 109. I rarely drink as it has decreased significantly. I prefer cannabis because it is cheaper, provides a longer tolerance plateau, and is healthier. Story 110. I did a mostly dry January, which turned into a mostly dry February and March so far. I expect the warm weather will increase consumption a bit. Story 111. I worked in casinos for years. From 1983 to 2000, when I was 19 to 36 years old, we would drink almost constantly. From 1989 to 2000, I worked in casinos on cruise ships, and we were drinking every day, all day for the 9-month contracts with a few weeks off for holidays in between. Drinks in the crew bar were 50 cents each. Now I have a few glasses of wine once a week. I don't have the friends around me like I did then. Most have sadly passed. I'm turning 61 next week, and it doesn't help that my birthday is on St. Patrick's Day. I don't think I'll ever stop completely, but alcohol is not really on my radar anymore. Thankfully, I'm very healthy. I have always said that all the worst things that have happened in my life are because of alcohol, and all the best things that have happened in my life are also because of alcohol. Story 112. I rarely drink. It hasn't really changed. I never drank much alcohol. I could go years without getting drunk, and I had to consciously decide to drink to the point of inebriation. I might have a few drinks with friends every few months, but it's not a regular occurrence. Story 113. It decreased after my celiac diagnosis. I can no longer handle it the way I used to. It is not worth it anymore. Story 114. I am now 31. I have always been a very social person influenced by nightlife. I play in bands, and that whole nightlife scene is an environment in which I thrive. In the past, I had no issues going out and having 4 or more drinks a few times a week. As I approach 30, while I still enjoy a night out with friends, it wears me out. I can't work out well the day after drinking, and I sleep poorly whenever I have more than a few drinks. Because of that, it has become less enjoyable. It's also less enjoyable to be a heavy-drinking grown man than it is to be a carefree young adult. I think it's a good transition. Story 115. I don't drink at all, and was able to stop completely at 24. I have been sober for a year now and will never touch alcohol again. I feel terrible when I drink. Story 116. I am 55 years old and cannot remember the last time I had a drink. It simply does not taste good to me. When I was younger, I certainly enjoyed it, but as I got older, especially after the age of 30, it increasingly lost its appeal. I genuinely consider this a blessing. Story 117. In my early 20s, I struggled with drinking. Now that I'm 30, I've picked it back up, especially towards the end of 2024. It's definitely becoming a problem. A lot of mutual drinking with my ex ruined the relationship. Now, I find myself drinking to cope with emotions. Story 118. I have 1 to 2 drinks a month and sometimes a bit more. I used to binge drink anywhere from 10 to 25 drinks in a night about once a week. Then I drank less but more frequently, about 6 to 10 drinks a week. Now, I just have the occasional drink when I feel like it. Story 119. I am in my early 50s. Gone are the days of hitting the bar early Saturday evening and not coming out until the small hours of Sunday. Maybe I will go out for a pub night on Thursday and for a good night out on Friday. These days, if I go out, it's to watch a game with 3 or 4 beers. I might have a few at home on Friday. My ability to recover from a hangover has really decreased. I don't like being sick on a Sunday. I also haven't had a beer since Christmas, as my wife is undergoing chemotherapy. I keep car keys in my pocket in case of an emergency trip to the hospital. I have had 3 trips so far. If all goes well, she'll finish treatment in June or July. I may celebrate with a bottle of champagne then, or I may choose to have a dry year. Story 120. I mostly drink socially these days. I used to enjoy beers occasionally at home and went through a phase where I wanted to appreciate good whiskeys. Now, I honestly don't feel the desire to drink. I still have many bottles of good whiskey, but they mostly just take up space. Once in a while, I might have a little, but that's quite rare. Story 121. I do not drink alcohol at all. I am 35 years old, and I simply do not enjoy it anymore. I consumed a lot in my teens and early 20s, but I have moved on from it. Story 122. I do 4 to 6 pints twice a week at a pub for socializing. I used to do 3 to 4 every day after work, so my consumption has definitely decreased. I expect it to decrease further as I move away from the bar scene. Story 123. I would say my alcohol consumption decreased significantly to nearly 0. I had a small glass of wine at my wedding this year, but I chose Sprite Zero since my wife is pregnant. Her father is an alcoholic, and I witnessed how it mentally affected her and her family. As a result, I removed alcohol from my diet permanently, not wanting her to associate me with that. When I was younger, I used to drink often, mostly every day and even more on weekends. Story 124. At 21, I consumed a big bottle of Fireball each week. 10 years later, at 31, I go through a 6-pack of cider in about a month. I hardly drink at all anymore. Story 125. My wife and I go on 2 to 3 cruises per year, and I usually have a drink every day afternoon. When we are not on the boat, I probably drink a beer with a meal once a month. Story 126. Maybe a 6-pack on the weekend. It has decreased since having a child. Legal marijuana makes me less likely to drink. Thanks a bunch for sticking around till the end of the video. Remember to subscribe, and until next time, stay awesome and goodbye.